She was just a newborn, her tiny wrist wrapped in a plastic hospital bracelet, letters barely stamped on the surface. One moment she was swaddled in her mother's arms at Providence General Hospital. The next, she was gone. No alarms, no records, just silence. And a mother who swore her baby had been stolen. 25 years later, a young woman opens a hidden drawer in her father's desk. Inside, a faded bracelet and a birth certificate with a name she has never heard before. Sarah Donovan. Oh, this is the story of a daughter who grew up under another name, of a mother who never stopped searching, and of the hospital room where truth was buried for decades, only to resurface at last. But before we begin, tell me, where in the world are you watching from? I read every single comment, and I love connecting with you all. Thank you. Boston breathed in winter and exhaled a thin mist that slicked the brick sidewalks and made the streetlights hum. The newsroom where Olivia Bennett interned was nearly empty, the last printer clicking like a metronome for insomnia. From the window, she watched the Charles River stretch the city's neon into trembling ribbons. A radio forgotten on a shelf whispered an old Motown song beneath the fluorescent buzz. She rubbed warmth back into her fingers and fed a strip of microfilm into the reader. The machine whirred, a sound like tape rewinding, like years trying to spool themselves back. Headlines slid across the glass: school board meets, mayor vows repairs. Then a smaller story snagged her. Providence General reports record nursery capacity. The photo was grainy, a row of bassinets with paper tags. Olivia didn't know why she'd stopped. She collected odd details the way some people kept seashells, not because they were useful, but because they sounded like the truth clearing its throat. In the photo's corner, a woman in a pale smock looked toward the camera with a mouth almost smiling, almost apologizing. The caption named no one. The air smelled of newsprint, dry and faintly sweet. Somewhere in the building, a door latched, a hollow wooden sound that made her shoulders jump. She laughed at herself, gathered the clippings, and stepped into sleet that stippled the pavement like grains of rice on a drum. She should have gone home. Instead, she rode the Red Line to Savin Hill, where her late father's duplex still carried his cologne in the walls, cedar and barbershop talc. Daniel Bennett had been a methodical man. Lists on the fridge, oil changed at exactly 5,000 miles, tax receipts in labeled folders. His office, a small bedroom with a single lamp, held that order even after the funeral. The lamp clicked on. Dust swam through the light like quiet snow. On the desk, a wooden organizer sat square as a courthouse. Pens, paper clips, a magnifying glass he used for contracts. Olivia ran her thumb along the edges and felt the wood dip at the far corner. As a child she drew here while he typed. He'd tap the desk twice when she fidgeted. Tap, tap. A gentle warning, the bottom drawer stuck. She tugged again, heard the dry protest of wood, and paused. Her reflection in the window looked older than 25, not because of age, but because goodbyes put years on the face. Peering into the gap, she saw a small metal catch holding the last inch shut. Beneath the magnifying glass lay a key thin as a wire, taped to a yellowing index card. In her palm it felt colder than it should, like something kept out of sunlight. She slid it into the slot. The catch released with a click too loud for a quiet room. The drawer rolled open on felt-lined rails. Inside, nothing. Just the square of felt, a tuxedo without a body. She tapped the felt, hollow. She pressed the corner and it dipped, then sprang back, a false bottom. She angled the light with the magnifying glass. A tab, almost invisible, waited where the seam bit at the wood. She slid a fingernail under and lifted. The felt rose, bringing with it a shallow tray. Resting there lay a baby's hospital bracelet, the plastic gone opaque with time, the stamped letters smudged, and a folded envelope so thin it might tear if she breathed too hard. Before she could unfold it, the radio in the hall clicked on and hissed with static. Olivia froze, heart drumming. The static softened like the end of a record, and then the building fell quiet again. She looked back at the bracelet. Through the whitened plastic, she could just make out the first two letters of a name. Sub. She picked up the envelope with both hands. The flap had been sealed, and resealed with clear tape turned the color of tea. She slid a knife under the tape. Paper sighed. Inside, something stiff shifted forward. In that breath between almost and finally, a thought landed like a stone in deep water. Whatever was inside had waited 25 years to ruin the version of her life she thought she knew. Margaret Bennett called at 9:11 p.m., the way she always did, on the minute, as if punctuality could keep the world from drifting. "Did you eat?" she asked, voice small and warm. "I grabbed a bagel," Olivia lied, eyes on the envelope. "I'm at Dad's, finishing the boxes." A pause. "You don't have to tonight." "I know." She didn't say. "I found something in his desk, and I'm afraid of what it knows about me." After they hung up, she breathed through the ache her therapist called anticipatory grief. The bracelet lay in the lamplight, its plastic cloudy as winter glass. Along the edge, she could read the brand, the same she'd seen on newborns when she shadowed a city reporter last spring. Details like that hooked into her brain and stayed. On paper, Olivia was an intern who rewrote obits and community notices. In practice, she was good at the ordinary magic of reporting, finding the clerk who knew which basement held which boxes, charming the librarian who could coax a microfilm machine back to life with a rubber band and a sigh. She knew how to file a records request and how to wait without losing the thread. She kept a quiet ledger of mysteries, personal and borrowed. On the desk sat a photo of Daniel and Margaret on a Cape Cod beach, their feet sunk where wet sand makes a cuff. He wore the baseball cap Olivia stole after the service. She still reached for the brim when anxiety walked into a room. Margaret's smile was the kind that chooses hope over proof. They'd never hid that Olivia was adopted. "You were chosen," Margaret said when Olivia was 6, a sentence that worked like a shield until middle school when questions grew teeth. A draft rattled the thin window. Olivia slid her finger under the envelope's flap and drew out a single sheet. A birth certificate, official border guns unfaded, state seal pressed into paper, soft as an old dollar. Header: Rhode Island Department of Health. Hospital, Providence General. Date, 25 years earlier. Time, 2:14 a.m. Between child's name and the colon, the ink had bled into a blur, like a name written and then wiped while still wet. Below, Mother read only E. Donovan, the first name redacted with a neat strip of correction tape that had curled at the edges. Attending physician, Richard Wallace, M.D. Her pulse ratcheted. Wallace was a name from her notebook, a quote last fall about a Dorchester clinic closing, courteous, careful, happy to speak on background. She hadn't known he'd ever practiced in Providence. On the back, Daniel's lawyer had stapled a note, "To be opened by O.B. when she is ready." The handwriting was Daniel's, tidy enough to balance on the line. Tucked under the staple sat a business card for a Providence private investigator, a decade old, the corners softened from being handled and put away again. In the top drawer, she found a little spiral notebook, her father's January lists that never wandered to February. The first page read, "Questions for Margaret," 4 bullets. 1. Adoption records. 2. Birth hospital. 3. Why Providence. 4. Bracelet. Who brought it home? The last line was a sentence. "Tell her when she's done looking for reasons to leave." He had never said it aloud. He must have planned to. She wanted to call Margaret and ask everything at once. She also wanted to wrap these papers in a towel and hide them under the sink. She was practiced at both impulses, the clean leap forward and the tidy denial. Her phone buzzed. A text from Lena Morales, her editor. "You still up? City desk has you on a nursing shortage piece tomorrow." Also unrelated, a reader tip about Providence General crossed my inbox. You want it? Providence General. The words struck exactly on pitch. She typed, yes. Lena replied with a contact, a retired records clerk willing to talk about how babies used to be checked in and out like library books. The woman's name was Mrs. Hanley. Address, South Boston. Wind pushed at the window, and the sash moaned. Olivia boxed the certificate with the bracelet and slid the false bottom back. As she closed the drawer, something caught. A second envelope, thinner, had slipped behind the tray. She fished it free. On the front, in Daniel's hand, a single line waited. If you find Dr. Wallace, ask him about room 419. Room numbers are a hospital's secret language. Labor rooms cluster. Nurseries hide behind cheerful glass. Upstairs, records live in darkness. She turned the note over, half expecting a map. Nothing. A car door shut on the street. Footsteps crunched in wet grit. Olivia saw only her reflection and the smeared glow of taillights. Back at the desk, she noticed a faint purple municipal stamp on the certificate. Delayed filing. Her skin prickled. Delayed meant someone had wanted time, to fix or to forget. She reached for the lamp. A gust slipped under the sash and lifted the top sheet like a hand raising a curtain. For a second, in the slant of light, she thought she saw the ghost of a first name emerge beneath the correction tape, the way impressions linger under erased pencil. It looked, impossibly, like a name that didn't belong to Olivia at all. Her phone rang and lit the room blue. Margaret, calling again. 10 p.m. exactly. The retired records clerk lived in a narrow South Boston row house that smelled faintly of mothballs and lemon cleaner. Olivia stood on the stoop with the cold in her teeth, clutching the birth certificate inside a manila folder. A lace curtain shifted before the door opened. Mrs. Hanley? The woman was small, her cardigan buttoned to the throat, eyes bright as a bird's. "Come in before the heat leaves," she said, ushering Olivia into a living room crowded with porcelain angels. Olivia sat on the edge of the floral sofa while Mrs. Hanley poured tea from a pot painted with violets. "So you're interested in Providence General?" the woman asked. "My father left me some papers," Olivia said carefully. "I was born there. Or I think I was." Mrs. Hanley stirred her own cup. The spoon tapped porcelain like a metronome. Providence General closed its maternity wing in the late 90s. Too many irregularities, they said. Back then, I handled admissions. Babies wore bracelets, mothers wore matching tags. Simple system, but once in a while, numbers didn't add up. A bracelet without a tag without a baby. Olivia's skin prickled. Did anyone investigate? Administrators wrote it off as clerical errors. Computers were just coming in, but we knew. Some nights, I'd hear nurses whisper about a room with no chart, no assigned mother, a room used for transfers. The words settled heavy. "Do you remember which room?" Olivia asked. Mrs. Hanley frowned, eyes drifting to the mantel crowded with angel figurines. 417. It's funny you ask. I never forgot that number. Olivia's breath tightened. The note from her father. "Ask him about room 417. Mrs. Hanley leaned forward. "One night I found a stack of forms with the same signature at the bottom, Dr. Richard Wallace. He approved everything. The man was respected, but he signed more delayed filings than anyone else." The tea cooled untouched. Olivia closed the folder and pressed it against her knees. "Do you think children were taken?" The old clerk's mouth trembled. "I think some mothers left without the children they gave birth to, and some children left with people who never bore them." Olivia stood on a carpet patterned with roses, her balance off as if the floor had tilted. She thanked the woman, promised discretion, and stepped back into the night, where the streetlights hummed like insects in jars. Her phone buzzed with a text from Lena. "Tip, check out." "Tomorrow?" She typed, "Yes, found something. Will explain." On the walk back to the T, Olivia passed a newspaper box covered in graffiti. Someone had scrawled a word in marker, missing. The letters bled into one another like they wanted to hide inside the dark. At the station, she fished coins for the vending machine. A boy about 12 watched her with an intentness that made her spine itch. His hoodie was 2 sizes too big, his sneakers new and glaring white. When she glanced up, he said, "You dropped this," and held out nothing but an empty palm. Before she could respond, the train roared in and swallowed the platform's silence. The boy slipped away, vanishing between the crowd and the shadows. On the ride home, Olivia unfolded the certificate again. The correction tape over the mother's name had lifted slightly, enough for a ghostly outline to show E. Donovan. She traced the letters with her nail. Donovan. She had no Donovan in her family tree, but the name scraped at her memory like a song she'd almost learned. The train screeched into her stop. She pocketed the certificate and stepped into the wet dark, her reflection fractured across puddles. At home, she opened her laptop and typed, "Providence General Hospital Room, Fort Montaigne." The search brought only fragments. A demolition notice, a neighborhood blog about asbestos removal, and an archived headline, "Mother claims baby switched at birth." She clicked. The story dated 25 years ago. The mother's last name, Donovan. Her hands shook on the keys. The article mentioned a nurse insisting the baby was healthy and present one moment, then suddenly gone the next. Hospital administrators dismissed the claim as hysteria. The screen dimmed. A notification popped up. Battery low. 5%. She reached for the charger. When she looked back, the article had disappeared. Page not found. The laptop screen glowed faint blue in the darkened apartment, a rectangle of vanishing truth. Olivia refreshed the page. Error 404. She copied the headline and tried again. Nothing. As if someone had reached through the wires and torn the story out by its roots. Her charger finally clicked into place. The fan word. She searched Donovan Providence General Baby Missing. After half a dozen dead ends, one old PDF surfaced, a digitized clipping from a Rhode Island paper. The headline had been cropped, but in the body she read, "The Donovan family continues to insist." Her heart thudded. The document stopped mid-sentence, as though the scan had been deliberately cut. A floorboard popped in the kitchen. Olivia froze. She hadn't cooked dinner. The refrigerator hummed. Silence followed. She gripped the laptop like a shield and crossed the living room. No one. The draft under the door carried the city's damp breath. She told herself she was tired, that grief turned echoes into ghosts. Still, she slid the chain across the lock and double-checked the windows. On her desk, the hospital bracelet lay curled like a question mark. She lifted it, pressed it against her wrist. The plastic barely reached halfway. In its cloudy strip, the faint letters returned. Sa. If the missing article was right, her name, Sarah Donovan, had been hidden, not just under tape, but under years of silence. The next morning she arrived at the newsroom early, coffee bitter on her tongue. Lena waved her over. "That tip. You'll want to take a recorder." Orly, she handed Olivia a slip of paper with an address in Providence. Retired nurse. Claims she saw things she shouldn't have. The name scrawled on the paper, C. Donovan. Olivia's throat tightened. Donovan? As in, didn't say, just promised details. Lena raised an eyebrow. You okay? Yeah. Her voice failed to convince either of them. The drive south felt longer than an hour. Rain slicked I-95, wipers thudding a tired rhythm. She rehearsed questions in her head but kept returning to one. What if she wasn't Olivia at all? Providence sprawled gray under low clouds. The address led to a modest house with peeling paint and a sagging porch. Olivia parked, rehearsed her press credentials, then stepped up the creaking stairs. The door opened before she knocked. A woman stood framed by dim light, late 40s, auburn hair streaked with gray, eyes the same shade as Olivia's. "You must be from the paper," the woman said. "Come in." The living room smelled faintly of lavender. Stacks of old magazines formed towers beside the sofa. On the wall, a photograph hung crooked, a family of 5 at a picnic, the youngest child's face turned away. "I'm Claire Donovan," the woman said, settling into an armchair. "I worked at Providence General when the baby started disappearing." Olivia's pulse stuttered. Donovan. The name that kept surfacing like a buoy. Claire continued, voice low. "We were told to follow orders. Transfer the newborns, no questions. Some nights I carried bassinets down to room 417 myself. Mothers would be asleep, sedated. When they woke, we told them complications had taken the child. Most believed us. A few didn't." Olivia clutched her recorder, the red light blinking like a heartbeat. "Why talk now?" "Because the people who ordered it are dead or dying, and because one of those babies was mine." The words cracked open the room. Rain hit the windows harder. Olivia felt the floor vanish under her. Claire leaned forward, eyes wet but unblinking. "My daughter disappeared 25 years ago. Her name was Sarah." The recorder captured the silence that followed, the kind thick enough to drown in. Olivia wanted to run, to deny, to fold herself back into the safe lie of being chosen, adopted, wanted. But the bracelet in her pocket pressed against her leg, insisting otherwise. Claire reached into a drawer and pulled out a shoebox, set it between them. Inside lay photographs, a hospital bassinet, a baby wrapped in a striped blanket, a certificate half completed. At the bottom sat a second bracelet, identical to Olivia's, the same faded plastic, the same stamped letters, 2 halves of the same proof. Claire's voice dropped to a whisper. "I've been looking for you for 25 years." Olivia's breath rattled. She wanted to ask 1,000 questions, but only one surfaced, raw and small. "How do you know it's me?" Claire opened her palm. There lay a necklace, a silver star pendant, dulled with time. "They didn't take this. You were wearing it when they carried you away, and I've seen you wearing it in your photos." Olivia touched the chain at her neck, the pendant she'd never taken off, a gift Margaret said came with her as a baby. The room tilted, her vision blurred, the recorder blinked, rain hammered. And in that instant, Olivia realized the truth she'd been circling since she opened the drawer. Her entire life had been built on a theft. The rain had thinned to a drizzle. When Olivia stepped back onto the porch, Claire's words chased her into the night. "I've been looking for you for 25 years. She drove without turning on the radio, headlights combing wet asphalt, thoughts colliding in her skull. Margaret's voice on the phone the night before, Daniel's neat handwriting on the note. The bracelet, the pendant, the sealed envelope. And now Claire Donovan claiming motherhood with evidence that fit too well. Back in Boston, Olivia sat at her kitchen table, surrounded by fragments. The 2 bracelets, the certificate, the shoebox of photos Claire had let her copy on her phone. She arranged them like puzzle pieces, but the picture that emerged refused to settle. She needed corroboration, proof beyond objects and grief. The next morning she signed out the newsroom's recorder again and drove to her retirement home in Quincy, where Dr. Richard Wallace now lived. She'd called ahead, posing as a reporter, writing about hospital closures. His voice on the phone had carried no suspicion, only fatigue. The home smelled of bleach and boiled vegetables. Wallace sat in a sunroom, a cardigan draped across his shoulders, his white hair combed back with care. His hands trembled slightly as he adjusted his glasses. "Providence General," Olivia began, pressing record. "You were chief physician in the maternity ward?" He nodded. "From 93 to 98. There are rumors of irregularities, babies unaccounted for." His eyes flicked to the recorder's red light. "Rumors." "Delayed filings," she pressed. "Room 417. The name hit him like a cough. He leaned back, staring through the window at a bird feeder. "You've done your homework," Olivia swallowed. "Did you authorize transfers of newborns?" His silence stretched. Finally he spoke, voice dry as paper. "We were told it was adoption, that the mothers had consented, that the paperwork was in order. But late at night, when the corridors went quiet, I signed forms I wasn't allowed to read. Babies left through side doors. Nurses whispered. I told myself it was mercy." Mercy? There were mothers who couldn't provide, or so they said. There were families who wanted children. I convinced myself I was smoothing a rough edge of the world, but I knew. He rubbed his temple. We weren't giving babies homes. We were erasing their names? Olivia's pulse hammered. "Do you remember the Donovan case?" His eyes slid shut. "Yes. The mother insisted her baby had been stolen. She screamed it down the halls. Security removed her. I was told she was unstable. But I saw the paperwork. The baby's name was Sarah." That file disappeared the next day. Her throat closed around the air. "Doctor," she whispered, "what would you say if I told you Sarah Donovan was alive?" His hands shook so violently she feared the teacup might shatter. "Then someone has been living a lie for 25 years, and so have I." Olivia clicked the recorder off. The silence that followed was heavier than any admission. When she left, Wallace remained by the window, a figure crumpled under the weight of the years. On the drive back, she called Margaret. Voicemail, again, voicemail. At the third attempt, Margaret answered. "Olivia, honey, what's wrong?" Olivia gripped the wheel. "We need to talk now." Margaret agreed to meet that evening at the duplex where Daniel's office still smelled of cedar. Olivia arrived early, pacing the hallway until headlights swept the window. Margaret climbed the steps slowly, her umbrella dripping, her face pale as porcelain. Inside, Olivia spread the evidence on the desk, the certificate, the bracelet, the photos Claire had shown her. "Tell me the truth," she said, her voice cracking. "Who am I?" Margaret's hands hovered above the papers as if they might burn. "I loved you," she whispered. "From the first night Daniel carried you through that door, you were crying and then you weren't. You fit against me like you'd been waiting." "That doesn't answer my question." Margaret's shoulders sagged. "We wanted a child so badly, years of doctors, treatments, prayers. Then one night Daniel came home from Providence. He said there'd been a complication, that a mother couldn't keep her baby. He told me it was legal, that it was right." "You never asked for papers?" "I asked. He said it would come later. And when I held you, I didn't care. You were ours. I told myself the rest didn't matter." Tears streaked her cheeks. I was wrong. Olivia pressed her palms to her eyes. "Claire Donovan says I'm her daughter. She has the other bracelet, the same necklace. Dr. Wallace admitted there were illegal transfers." Margaret sobbed into her hands. "I didn't know. I swear. If I'd known another mother was searching, Olivia cut her off. "Then why did Dad hide the birth certificate? Why the notes? Why wait until he was gone?" Margaret's silence was answer enough. Olivia gathered the bracelet and necklace into her fist. "Do you understand? My life has been a cover-up." Margaret reached across the desk, but Olivia pulled back. "Please," Margaret whispered. "Whatever you discover, don't forget we raised you with love. That was real." Olivia's breath trembled. She wanted to believe love could excuse lies, but the papers on the desk weighed heavier than affection. She stood abruptly. "I'm going to Providence. I need to see room 417. Margaret's eyes widened. "The hospital's been closed for years. Then there's nothing to hide." That night, Olivia drove south again. Providence General loomed abandoned, its windows boarded, its sign half hanging by rusted bolts. Rain tapped the roof of her car like fingernails. She parked by the chain-link fence and found a gap where others had forced their way in. The halls inside smelled of mold and plaster dust. Paint peeled in long curls. The silence was thick, broken only by her flashlight beam cutting through particles that floated like ash. She followed faded numbers painted on the walls: 401, 405, 411. Room 417 waited at the end of the corridor, its door swollen shut. She shoved with her shoulder until the frame groaned and gave way. The room was small, tiled, with a single cracked window. Cabinets lined one wall. On the floor lay a rusted hospital crib, its wheels frozen, a blanket decayed into threads. Olivia's light caught a clipboard wedged behind the cabinet. She pulled it free. Pages fused by moisture, crumbled at the edges. But on the top sheet, faint but legible, a name remained: Donovan, Sarah, transferred. Her chest clenched. Proof. Footsteps echoed in the corridor. Olivia killed the light, heart hammering, dust shifted. A shadow crossed the doorway. "Hello?" a voice called. Male, older, strained. "Is someone there?" Olivia held her breath. The figure stepped into the beam of moonlight seeping through the cracked window. It was Dr. Wallace, his face ashen, his sweater soaked from rain. "You shouldn't be here," he said, voice trembling. "There are people who don't want this uncovered." "Then why are you here?" Olivia demanded. He held up a folder wrapped in plastic. "Because guilt weighs more than secrets. And because if you are who I think you are, this file belongs to you." He handed it over, then glanced nervously down the hall. "But be careful. Files go missing. Witnesses, too." Before Olivia could respond, a crash echoed from the far end of the building. Metal on tile, deliberate, close. Wallace flinched. "We're not alone." The crash echoed through the hollow corridors like a gunshot, bouncing off tile and steel. Olivia's pulse surged. Wallace gripped her arm. "Stay quiet," he whispered, eyes darting. But the sound came again, deliberate, closer. The scrape of metal dragged across the floor. Olivia turned her flashlight back on, beam trembling. It swept past graffiti, broken glass, the outline of a gurney tipped on its side. A figure emerged from the far end. A man in a dark raincoat, hood low over his face. His steps were slow, measured as if he already knew who was there. Wallace's breath stuttered. "We should go." But Olivia stood rooted, the folder in her hands like a shield. The man stopped just short of the light's reach. "You're digging where you shouldn't," he said, voice rough, practiced in authority. "Room 417 is closed." "George, who are you?" Olivia demanded. "Someone who kept order when the rest of them lost their nerve." He stepped closer, and she saw his face lined, his jaw sharp. "Security. Providence General. Back then I moved the bassinets. Doctors gave orders, nurses obeyed, I kept doors shut." Wallace stiffened. "Carson," he muttered. The man smirked. "You remember. You always looked the other way, Doctor." Olivia's throat went dry. "Why follow us now?" "Because some ghosts need to stay buried." He tapped the side of the doorframe. "People paid for silence, paid well. And I'm not about to see that undone because a girl thinks she needs the truth." "I'm not just a girl," Olivia shot back. "I'm one of them, one of the babies you helped disappear." The words cracked through the air like lightning. Carson blinked, then tilted his head. "Then you should thank me. Without us, you'd have grown up in nothing but chaos." Wallace stepped forward. "She deserves to know her identity." Carson's smile faded. "Identity doesn't matter. Survival does, and survival means forgetting." Olivia's grip tightened on the folder. She flicked the flashlight onto Carson's chest. His jacket gleamed wet. His left hand clutched something metallic, a crowbar, rusted but solid. "You should leave," he said. "Now, before you learn more than you can live with." For a moment no one moved. Then footsteps sounded again, but not Carson's. From the stairwell another figure appeared, Claire Donovan. She was soaked, hair plastered to her cheeks, eyes blazing. "Don't listen to him," she shouted. "He's the reason you vanished." Carson cursed under his breath. Claire charged forward, putting herself between Olivia and the man. 25 years you've hidden. 25 years I've lived without my daughter. It ends tonight." The crowbar scraped the floor. Then you'll regret walking in. Olivia's light swung wildly between them. The damp air reeked of rust and mildew, but beneath it she smelled something acrid. Smoke from the hallway, faint but rising. Someone else was here. Carson turned toward the scent, distracted. Claire grabbed Olivia's wrist. "Run!" But Olivia shook her head. "Not without the truth." She raised the folder. "What's in here?" Wallace's voice cracked. "Those are transfer logs, names, dates, signatures, enough to prove everything." Carson lunged, but Olivia darted sideways, folder clutched tight. Wallace stumbled against the crib and Claire shoved Carson with both hands. The crowbar clanged against tile. The sound drew footsteps, heavier now, multiple. Olivia's stomach dropped. More than one person was coming. From the corridor, two shadows lengthened. A man's voice called, "Carson?" Carson swore. "Get out," he barked at Olivia. But Olivia stood frozen, because the second voice, softer, female, was familiar. Margaret. "Olivia!" The flashlight quivered in her hand. "Mom?" Margaret stepped into the broken doorway, raincoat dripping, eyes wide with dread. Behind her, another man in a suit carried a leather briefcase. He looked official, polished, out of place in the decay. Carson exhaled relief. Finally, someone who understands. Margaret's gaze flicked to the folder in Olivia's hands, then to Claire. Her lips parted, trembling. The suited man adjusted his glasses. "Miss Bennett, you've stumbled into records that were never meant to see daylight. I advise you return them." Olivia's grip tightened. "And if I don't?" The man smiled thinly. "Then you'll find out how far powerful families will go to protect reputations built on lies." Her heart thundered. Between Claire's desperate eyes, Margaret's guilt, Wallace's shame, and Carson's menace, Olivia realized the truth was bigger than stolen babies. It was a system, a machine. And she had just ripped the cover off its gears. The silence in room 417 grew thick, broken only by the drip of rain through a cracked ceiling tile. Olivia's chest heaved, folder pressed tight as if it were armor. Margaret took one cautious step forward. "Olivia, please. Give him the file. You don't understand the danger." Claire's voice cut sharp. "Don't you dare. That's her life in those pages." Olivia's throat burned. "Mom, are you working with them?" Margaret shook her head fiercely. "No, I never wanted this. But Daniel, he made promises. He said it was the only way. After he died, they came to me. They said, if the truth surfaced, it would destroy you." The suited man cleared his throat, polished and calm. "What your mother means is that some histories are best left sealed. Adoptions were arranged. Records were misplaced. Why reopen wounds when a young woman grew up safe, educated, loved?" Olivia's voice cracked. "Because it wasn't yours to decide." Carson shifted, crowbar dangling loose at his side. Wallace leaned heavily on the crib, his face gray with guilt. Claire stood trembling, her hands balled into fists. Margaret reached out again. "Honey, please, I raised you. I bandaged your knees, read you bedtime stories, held you through every fever. That's real. This—" She gestured to the bracelet, the certificate. "This will only break you." Tears blurred Olivia's vision. "But it's already broken me." The suited man stepped closer, lowering his voice. "Miss Bennett, you should know something before you choose recklessness. Those logs you hold don't just name your mother. They name donors, judges, politicians, men and women who ensured Providence General thrived. If those names are exposed, you won't just be reclaiming your past. You'll be declaring war on people who bury threats deeper than graves." Olivia's knees weakened. For a flicker, she considered surrender, handing over the file, retreating into the half-life of ignorance. But then Claire spoke. "They told me the same lies," she said, her voice raw, "that it would be safer not to fight, that no one would believe a single mother, and I lost you for 25 years. I'll be damned if I let them steal you again." Carson's patience snapped. He lunged, crowbar raised. Olivia ducked, folder clutched. Claire shoved Carson sideways. Wallace shouted. The suited man cursed, stumbling back. Margaret cried out. The room exploded with movement. The folder slipped from Olivia's hands, pages scattering across the wet tile like fallen leaves. Carson grabbed for them, but Olivia dove first, her knees scraping. She snatched a sheet, the top name glowing faint under her flashlight. Donovan, Sarah. Transfer approved. Wallace R. Wallace gasped. That's my signature. Claire's scream tore the air. You signed away my daughter. Wallace staggered, clutching his chest. I was ordered. You chose, Claire spat. Olivia gathered as many pages as she could, tucking them under her jacket. Carson wrenched one free, tearing it down the middle. Margaret dropped to her knees, trying to grab Olivia's arm. Stop this before you ruin everything, Margaret begged. Olivia's eyes locked on hers. Everything was ruined the night I was stolen. For a heartbeat, the room froze. Every figure caught between past and present, guilt and survival. Then headlights flared through the broken window, sweeping across their faces. Tires screeched outside. Voices shouted. Claire's eyes widened. Police? The suited man smirked. Not quite. Dark shapes entered the corridor, men in heavy coats, moving with the precision of people who didn't fear consequence. One barked an order. Secure the files. Carson dropped his crowbar, relief on his face. Margaret covered her mouth. Wallace sagged against the wall. Claire grabbed Olivia's wrist. We have to go, now. But the men were already at the door. Olivia clutched the torn pages under her jacket. Her heart battered her ribs. For 25 years the truth had been buried. Now it was clawing its way to the surface, and powerful hands were trying to shove it back down. The suited man gestured calmly, almost polite. Miss Bennett, come with us. We can resolve this quietly. Olivia's flashlight beam quivered. She knew this was the moment, the point where her life as Olivia Bennett ended and Sarah Donovan's fight for truth began. She bolted for the window. Glass shattered. Cold rain lashed her skin. Claire followed, shouting her name. Behind them, men shouted orders, boots pounding tile. The folder was gone. But in Olivia's jacket, the torn pages pressed against her chest like a second heartbeat. She hit the ground outside hard, mud soaking her palms. Claire landed beside her. Sirens wailed faint in the distance. Not police, not yet, but maybe hope. They ran into the dark, headlights sweeping the hospital's facade behind them. Shadows chased, but Olivia didn't look back. Because, for the first time, she wasn't just fleeing lies. She was carrying the truth. Cold rain needled their faces as Olivia and Claire ran from the hospital's shadow to the only light open on the block, a diner with fogged windows and a neon coffee sign. Inside, vinyl seats squeaked. A radio whispered weather. Olivia slid into a booth and pressed the torn pages flat with trembling palms. They won't stop, Claire said, eyes on the door, but you don't have to do this alone. I don't even know who I is, Olivia said. She pulled the star pendant from her collar. This was yours. It was my mother's first, Claire said. I clipped it to your blanket so the world wouldn't forget your name. The waitress poured coffee. Olivia breathed the steam, then photographed each torn page and sent them to Lena. If I don't make it in, publish, and call the Attorney General. We'll do a DNA, Claire said, not because I need it, but because you deserve proof. Olivia nodded. Daniel left notes about room 417. He wanted to tell me when I was done looking for reasons to leave. I think he was trying to make it right. Then he tried to save you twice, Claire said, by hiding the file, and by leaving you the way in. At dawn, they reached the newsroom. Lena met them at the door in a hoodie, legal pad under her arm. You're okay, she breathed, then saw the pages. We copy, we back up, we call counsel. Sit. As the copier warmed, Olivia noticed a white envelope pinned to the board. To city desk, room 417. Lena opened it. Ask Wallace about room 417. Don't trust hospital counsel. DB. Daniel Bennett, Olivia whispered. We chased it and found Mrs. Hanley, Lena said softly, and Claire. She squeezed Olivia's shoulder. Your father started this. He didn't know how to undo it, but he tried. Something in Olivia cracked. She heard his old tap-tap on wood and let herself cry until breathing felt possible again. Lena slid over a burner phone. Use this. I booked a rush DNA. Preliminary in 24 hours. Olivia's screen buzzed. Unknown number. Hello? Miss Bennett, Dr. Wallace said. I recorded a statement with names and dates. I'll testify. Why now? Because mercy, without truth, is cowardice, he said, and because Daniel came to me 2 years ago asking how to fix what he'd helped start. He ran out of time. I won't, Olivia said. A knock rattled the glass. Lena peeked, then exhaled. It's her. Margaret stood in the hallway, raincoat wrinkled, fingers white around a manila envelope. Her eyes were rimmed red, but steady. Let her in, Olivia said. Claire reached across the table but stopped just short, as if asking permission. When Olivia didn't move away, Claire rested her fingers lightly on the back of Olivia's hand, an anchor, more than an embrace. I kept your room for years, she said, almost embarrassed by the confession. Fresh sheets every Saturday. I told myself you might walk in and say you were hungry. Olivia pictured a small room painted a hopeful color, the bed made with precision, a window that learned the shape of waiting. The image hurt and healed at once. I like peanut butter on toast, she said, surprising herself. Too much of it. Claire let out a small laugh that broke into a sob. The waitress pretended not to notice, topping off their coffee as if grief were just another thing you could refill. Margaret stepped into the bullpen as if entering a church, shoulders rounded by apologies. She held out the envelope. He wanted you to have this. I was a coward. Inside lay a safe deposit key, a Providence bank address, and a note in Daniel's even hand. If the desk drawer doesn't say enough, box 312 will. Tell her I'm sorry for my silence. Love and truth are the same thing when you walk them to the end. DB. Come with us, Olivia said. An hour later, in a quiet bank that smelled of toner, the clerk slid open box 312. Inside, mini DV tapes, a leather notebook, an old flip phone. Daniel's evidence archived like taxes. Back at the newsroom, Lena found a camcorder. The tape clicked, that soft rewind sound Olivia now associated with courage. Daniel filled the monitor, hair thinner, smile tired, eyes clear. If you're watching this, kiddo, I ran out of courage while I still had time, he said. I believed men with files who called theft mercy. I believed it until a woman named Claire Donovan screamed the truth down a hallway and security dragged her past me. I've been trying to walk back to that moment ever since. I met Dr. Wallace. I hired a private investigator. I sent the newsroom a tip when fear kept me from telling you to your face. I wrote names because names kept you from your mother. If this hurts, it should. Hurt is how bones tell you what broke. I loved you, Olivia, or Sarah, or both. I loved the child with juice on the couch and the reporter with better questions. I can't give back what I took, but you can take back your name. And please, be kind to Margaret. She believed me because she believed in us. The screen froze, then went blue. Margaret sobbed. Claire reached across the table. Olivia covered both their hands. I won't choose between you, she said. They already stole enough. Then we stand together, Claire whispered. Tell me what to do, Margaret said. Tell the truth. With me. Lena returned with copies and a legal pad. AG's office will see you at 9. Bring the originals and Wallace's statement. We have outside counsel. The lab will have preliminary DNA by morning. They went back to Daniel's duplex to plan. The city smelled new after rain. On the desk, Olivia set the bracelet and star pendant until their circles touched. Margaret made tea by muscle memory. Claire opened Daniel's notebook, reading names the way some families read prayers. Hours later, amid boxes and photocopies, Margaret confessed. The night Daniel brought the baby home, the lie about emergency adoption, the men who visited after the funeral, polite and predatory. "I thought quiet kept you safe," she said. "Quiet just made me small." Olivia took her hand. "They designed it that way." She turned to Claire. "I can't give you the years back, but I can give you the truth with my name on it." "That's all I wanted," Claire said. Just before dawn, as streetlights clicked off, Olivia typed the last lines of her statement. Lena skimmed. "It reads like a spine." The burner rang, speaker on. "A woman from the Attorney General's office. We received your materials. We're moving fast. There's something you should see when you arrive. A judge who signed several delayed filings and a donation pattern to the hospital foundation." Olivia looked at the bracelet and pendant, circles touching. She felt Daniel's tap-tap in her pulse, a metronome for courage. "We'll be there at 9. On the drive to the bank, Margaret spoke in fits and starts, words like stones she had to lift with both hands. "I told myself a story," she said, "that a mother had chosen us, that love could erase paperwork. When Daniel started locking the office, I knew the story had seams." Traffic idled at a light. A church bell tolled the half hour. "When he got sick, he tried to talk," Margaret went on. "But every apology cracked him open, and I kept saying, 'Later.' Then later didn't come." No one answered. The car filled with the sound of the turn signal, an audible metronome counting choices. As they gathered their coats, Olivia paused at Daniel's desk. She tapped the wood twice, the old signal, answered now by silence, and slipped the bracelet into her pocket. Outside, the Charles River waited, dark and patient. When dawn hit, it would stretch Boston's lights into trembling ribbons again, the same river she had watched on the night. This began, the night the microfilm machine hummed and history spooled backward. Only now the reel was moving forward, and she was the one turning the crank. They started toward the door. A soft hiss broke the hush, paper sliding over carpet. An unmarked envelope had been slipped under the threshold. Olivia bent, heart knocking. Inside lay a single document, the original birth certificate, unredacted, Sarah Claire Donovan, clear as daylight, and a yellow sticky note in tidy block letters. Room 417 wasn't the first. The Attorney General's office occupied a granite building where marble stairs echoed each step like a warning. Olivia carried the unredacted certificate against her chest, Claire steady at her side, Margaret trailing with the weight of a lifetime on her shoulders. Inside, officials copied files, logged evidence, listened to Wallace's recorded confession. The suited man who had threatened them at the hospital was nowhere to be seen, but his shadow lingered in every cautious glance exchanged between investigators. Olivia watched as the DNA swab was sealed and sent to the lab. The clerk's voice was procedural, but Olivia's pulse hammered with each word: mother, child, confirmation pending. When the meeting ended, Claire squeezed Olivia's hand. "However the test comes back, I know who you are." Margaret's eyes filled. "Me too." Back at the duplex that evening, the three women sat around Daniel's desk. The bracelet and pendant rested side by side under the lamp's glow. Rain had cleared. The city hummed outside with ordinary life. Commuters, sirens, laughter, unaware that a secret older than Olivia was dissolving in that room. Claire opened Daniel's notebook again. He wrote everything: names, transfers, dates. He wanted this scene. Olivia nodded. "He wanted me to walk it to the end." Margaret whispered, "And you will." Olivia stared at the false bottom of the drawer, the place where it began. She remembered the magnifying glass, the taped key, the hiss of static on the radio that night. She realized the drawer had not only hidden her past, it had also given her a way to claim it. She leaned back, exhausted but certain. The truth was no longer buried. It lived in files, in voices, in bracelets and pendants, but most of all it lived in her, refusing silence. The following morning, the DNA results arrived. Positive match, 99.9%. Sarah Donovan, Olivia Bennett. Both names belonged to her now. Claire wept, pulling her into an embrace that trembled with 25 years of waiting. Margaret reached out too, hesitant, until Olivia caught her hand and drew her in. For the first time, all three held each other not as enemies divided by lies, but as survivors bound by truth. Later, Olivia walked alone by the Charles River, the same water she had stared at from the newsroom window when all she had was a microfilm headline. Now it reflected dawn's first gold, stretching into trembling ribbons across the current. She thought of Daniel's voice on the tape. Love and truth are the same thing when you walk them to the end. She thought of Claire's Saturday ritual, sheets changed in a room that waited. She thought of Margaret's bedtime stories, the shield of chosen that had kept her safe, until questions grew teeth. The city stirred behind her, unaware. But somewhere in Providence, locked boxes waited. Somewhere in Boston, files lingered in basements. And somewhere inside her, a resolve had taken root. She unclipped the hospital bracelet from her pocket and set it on the railing. The river breeze lifted it slightly, the faded letters, Sa, catching the light. Next to it she placed the star pendant, two objects, once symbols of theft, now proof of survival. "I'm both," she whispered, "and I'm still here." She left them on the railing, not as things lost, but as things released. Then she walked forward, steps firm, the city opening ahead, because 25 years of silence had ended, and the story that began in room 417 was no longer theirs to bury. It was hers to tell.